Happy Friday, folks. As you see on their screen, back home again in Indiana. It's been 2 years since we didn't have a state finals, so we're back at the Vic. And here to sing Back Home Again in Indiana is our own Steve Krah. Steve, take it away.
Me. So there is no confusion. If this was the Old West, notice I'm wearing white and Hardy over here is wearing black. So you draw your own conclusions.
The
Hey, and by the way, it's the first day of the state finals.
Yeah,
Buried the lead.
a little bit of baseball happening today. I don't know if we want to talk about that or let's just
Yeah,
talk
why
about
not?
that great
Let's get into that.
back home again in Indiana. We need to.
I probably could sing that. I would. That our audience would go down and down and down if I did, but I probably could do that.
Well, both of us agreed as we were talking offline here. I think it would be so cool if the state finals, all the state finals, did like they do at the Indy 500 and sing "Back Home Again in Indiana" along with the national anthem.
We got a lot of talented singers, and well, they could do it instrumentally or something. And yeah, why not? That would be talk about getting the hairs standing up on the back of your neck.
How speaking of that, how excited do you get when they play the national anthem at the state finals? I mean, I get goosebumps.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's just about to go down right then. So
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
it's something special for sure. So folks, it is Friday, and we have got two games in the 2022 state finals to talk about today. And it started out like we talked about last week. 384 teams started the tourney this year, and with one goal in mind, and that's this: to meet at the Vic. And the result, here we have it. Here are the teams that are playing at the Vic today and tomorrow. Today, we have Centerville versus Illiana Christian, the first game. It's the 2A game, followed by Brebeuf versus Andrean, the 3A game. Now, before we get started, a lot of the coaches we talked to, some of them have been there, some of them have not. Andrean, for example, they've been there 9 times. Some of them, it's their first. But there is something special and some special challenges about playing at Victory Field. And we had a chance to interview them this week. And let's hear what today's 4 coaches for Centerville, Illiana Christian, Brebeuf, and Andrean had to say about playing at the Vic. Let's give it a listen.
Well, we had a girls team in Illinois one time. Our softball team played for the state championship, but Illinois was a little different, right? Where you would have multiple teams downstate. So the day they made it, it wasn't like everybody knew they were making it that day. So with everybody having a week to prepare for this, the same as Centerville, right? I think I read that right. They're going for the first state championship ever too. I think it's going to be a pretty good crowd for both schools, I would think.
It's crazy. My AD Shane Osteen was at Newcastle, and he's been through this a couple times. And he told me Saturday after we won, he said, "Hang on, because we've got last week was pretty crazy winning the regional. It's the first regional victory in a game for our baseball program in school history, and to win the entire regional obviously was the first time, and that was pretty crazy that whole week. And then Saturday rolls around, and next thing a walk-off single, and you're in the state title game. And my phone, my email, text messages, all kinds of messages has been blowing up. The community, and when I say the community, it's not just the Centerville community; it's the whole county. It's pretty crazy.
When you first play there, number one, you're a little awestruck, right? It's beautiful venue, and an unbelievable backdrop with the city of Indianapolis there. So you have that factor. It's really big. The foul territories are much bigger. The gaps are much bigger than your normal high school field. So positioning your outfielders is a very difficult thing out there at Victory Field, especially if you haven't been there. And communicating is extremely challenging out there for some reason. Having been there the last 2 years and played on that field, to me is a huge advantage for our guys and our coaching staff and myself as well, to be able to figure out how to coach there and communicate there. And it's just so different.
And when we came home from Ballard, we somehow got I-65 was being torn up in Indianapolis. So we had to take some of the side roads and we went right by Victory Field. And our kids on our van was, oh yeah, we'll be there in 2 months. And my son and I were the driver and the passenger. And we looked at each other saying, man, if you think you're going to get there the way you played this weekend, and that was coming off those 3 wins, we were laughing like there's no way we're coming back there if we don't get markedly better. And we did. So I guess they profited. They prophesized that we were going to be there. I didn't believe that was going to happen based on their 3 games, but they just kept on getting better, and better and better. So we're just excited to be there. I'm sure they're excited to be there too. It's, again, these kids who are seniors were freshmen when we were there last time. Some of them were on the bench at the time. None of them played. So they know what the Victory Field looks like. They experienced the practice up to Victory Field, but it's a new opportunity for them. And it doesn't get old for me, that's for sure. And it's new for them. And I'm gonna look back when they walk into that stadium and see that and see their eyes in amazement. And
Steve, you had a chance to talk to all 4 of them.
Again,
you're the one doing the interviews
on
these, and
biggest stage possible for high school baseball. So
all the questions you asked, a couple of them specifically pertaining to the Vic. We were talking about the excitement of the national anthem and how it gets makes our hair stand up on our necks, gives us goosebumps. Well, the place can get rocking for sure. And one of the questions you asked was, those outfielders, that's a big gap out there, and those outfielders are going to have some lungs. What did some of them talk about, or what are some of the challenges out there just for, the dimensions of the field and that communication element?
Right. They have to make sure they're communicating outfielder to infielder on the relays. And, you figure the catcher is running the defense. So he's really got to have the lungs to let everybody know that's 200, 300 feet away from him at any given time, what's going on. They go through all this stuff. They kind of know where they're supposed to be, but, it's what are they going to cut? Or are you going to let the ball go through? Those kind of things. And the Vic is such a big ballpark. Some of these teams have played at bigger ballparks, minor league professional places. Some have not. It is 402 to dead center. It's 418 in the left center field gap. So a typical high school field is about 375, 380 to center field and in from that. So there are a few exceptions. So you don't want to get the ball in the gap, because then you're talking about triple or maybe inside the park home run, depending on where it goes. You got some speedy outfielders that can, cut those gaps off. If they don't catch the ball, at least keep it from rolling all the way to the ball.
Well, and another thing that they were talking about, and you were talking about with them, is, taking the right angles. It's I think ultimately what it comes down to is, when you have the noise element, when you have the newness of a field, when you have the grandeur of the stage, I think, these 14 to 18-year-old kids, they really have to be engaged in the game. I think probably more than, any game they've ever played in, they really need to proactively think ahead, what am I going to do in this situation if this happens, because sometimes, that communication element might break down just for the factor of noise and, the speed of the game, because, another kind of aspect of this is it's going to come and go quick. They worked all year for this. They worked 4 years for this. They worked their whole, childhood to get to this spot. now they're here, and they've got to slow the game down. And the way they slow the game down is to be engaged in the game. Don't just let it slip by. And some of the coaches talked about that. One of the other question that you asked them, and this was a great question, we had some great answers to this, was the turnaround game. When they're looking back, every coach looks back, and a lot of teams know maybe going into a season that this, quote unquote, could be their year. They have, the expectation levels are relatively high. And I think it's safe to say that all 8 teams playing today and tomorrow had a decent level of expectation on their season. But at some point, that expectation really started to become a reality. They started to be able to visualize, hey, this really could happen. And it's that game where they consciously said, okay, we learned something here that's going to really change our season, and we can do this. We really have a shot here. And some of them, it was a slow process. Some of them, it really flipped the switch to where they really found that good marriage between confidence and effort. We're going to watch a video here where each of the 4 coaches today talk about that turnaround game. And Steve, when you were talking to them, any of those points stand out? To me, it was, Andrean said it was that slow progression. Then, I think it was Centerville that said it was that one specific game that really flipped the switch for him. Anything? What are some of the takeaways before we watch this video as you were talking to them about the turnaround game for their season?
Dave Pishkur and Andrean said we really didn't have a turning point per se. I said we know we often don't get outside to play until our first game. That's just the nature of being in Northwest Indiana in the cold, and that it's a typical Andrean year in that the lineup on day one isn't necessarily the lineup at the end of the season. Their number 9 hitter is now leading off for them, and there's been some other things shaking around. I think they're competing with one another all the time to figure out who that combination is going to be. At the same time, you look at Jeff VenderWoude at Illiana, and he's talking about a specific time where they lost a couple to Griffith, and they lost to Hanover Central in the middle of their season. And then they got hot and they started playing for each other, which is what they wanted to do all along. But that really kicked in, and they've won like 13 or 14 games since then. And here they are at Victory Field. So those are a couple of contrasting things going on. And those two are 2 teams not playing each other, but they're from the same area of the state.
Yeah, two Northwest teams back in the state final, and another. Mentioning Jeff VenderWoude, it's the first time I got a chance to virtually talk to him when we were talking this week. Him and Coach Thompson, 2 coaches that I've not met before prior to this week, but they're just 2 more great examples. And when you throw in Coach Scott and Coach Pishkur, I say this every week, we have great men, great coaches who are also great men leading these programs, and we're going to hear some multiple examples of that going forward. So let's take a listen to all 4 coaches playing today about that turnaround point in their season, or if it was a single point or if it was a gradual progression. And let's hear what the coaches had to say about that.
We had a really tough week in May, where we played our rival Hagerstown in our conference twice. We played them in the conference game, and we played them in the county tourney. We lost both ball games by a run. And Hagerstown's a heck of a ball team. They're young, they're fundamental, and after that week, we had some long conversations as a team, a couple meetings where we talked about focus, we talked about accountability, and we talked about how we react to adversity on the field. And I don't think that week we didn't react really well when we got put in adverse situations, which I just said to another gentleman about 30 minutes ago. I told him, I said, I don't think we then went on a run. I think we won 7 or 8 games in a row since that loss on Saturday in the county tourney to Hagerstown. And I don't believe until the championship game there in the semi-state that we were ever behind in a game. So when we led against Linton Stockton until the 7th, and then they took a lead on us, is the first time that our team has seen that adversity since that week. And they came back and responded really, really well to pick up 2 runs in the bottom of the 7th and walk off that win.
The turning point would be we went through a stretch. I think it was we lost 2 to Griffith, and then we lost a 1-run game to Highland. But talking with the kids and everything that we've been preaching this year, our verse of the year was James 1:2-3, and it's basically saying, consider it pure joy when you hit trials and tribulations, because our faith is being strengthened. So basically, we challenged the boys, and they responded well, and it's exactly what what we've been preaching to them all year. So that would be the turning point. And then the win that we needed, then we lost the game to Hanover 1-0, and then the next day or 2 days later we came out and beat them 6-1, and we've been going pretty well since then. But the kids made all the little things, they controlled the controls of what they can do, and they made all the adjustments. Very proud of them.
We had a senior leader meeting sometime back in late January, early February, which we had all year long with that group of guys once a week. And one of the things that I talked about with them was, let's just enjoy this last ride here, and let's take this thing day by day. Let's go work hard and enjoy each day and see where we get when this thing's over. But I do think if I went back to one particular game that maybe got our attention, was the Center Grove game. We jumped out on them pretty quickly, had an 8-0 lead with them, had one really bad inning that put us in a difficult situation. We had to get Andrew out of that game, and Center Grove did a good job chipping away at us and ended up beating us by 1 run. I think that game kind of woke us up a little bit, and we haven't lost a game since. So I would have to go to that game to find a game in our season that I think woke us up. I mean, obviously they were ranked number 1 at the time, so it was a really big game, and our guys knew we could compete on that stage and compete with that team, and we got beat. And I think from then on, their mindset changed a little bit.
If there's one game that kind of showed me that we could win without Peyton on the mound, it would be the Penn game. We hosted Penn, I think the last day in April, or toward the last Friday in April. And Owen Wolkowiak, who's my number 2 pitcher, hadn't been really throwing very well up to that point. He was scuffling a little bit. He was walking too many guys, wasn't striking guys out, didn't have a good breaking pitch. Kind of was like, man, we're kind of disappointed to know when he's not really doing what we thought he was capable of doing. And then we said, we're going to throw him against Penn and see what happens. And for 6 innings, he gave up 1 run on 2 hits and had 6 strikeouts, I think, through the 6 innings. And then we took him out in the 7th. And at that point, we kind of think, wow, we beat Penn. Now, I know they didn't throw their ace either, but we don't usually have the greatest opportunity to beat Penn without our ace on the mound. And we played with Owen, and we hit the ball well, and Owen pitched extremely well. And from that point on, Owen's had some tough games. He beat Hobart when we were down 4-1 against Hobart and brought him in, and he threw like 6 innings of shutout baseball. He pitched really well in the Bajensky tournament. He beat Marist out of Chicago, which is a really good program. So, and then he beat St. Joe in the first game of the regionals. So again, the Penn game might be the one that kind of told me that we're good enough to beat some of the really good teams, but we just kept on getting better week to week, month to month. And that's what good teams expect to do. So I'm not going to say we're going to go out Friday and play like the greatest game of the world, but we're playing our best baseball right now, and that's all you can ask.
Good stuff right there. I tell you, once again, every week we say this too, Steve. I think most of those interviews were about 15, 20 minutes on average. And we cut them down pretty small just to to fit in the show. But man, we could have a full show on each one of these coaches and the conversations we had with them. Just great stuff. Let's look at our first matchup of the day. And we are talking about Centerville versus Illiana Christian. And looking at our matchups here, let's look at how they got here. Sectional round, Centerville beat Shenandoah and Hagerstown. They beat two of the best baseball hats in the state of Indiana, because that's important. Illiana Christian, Centerville did. Illiana Christian, who also has a great hat of their own, by the way, took down the Bowman Academy, Hammond Bishop Knoll, and Wheeler. The Wheeler game was a bit of a, they got some vengeance there from losing to them last year. In the regional round, Centerville took down a good Cascade team. That Cascade team was 24-5. They were number one in the Crossroads. They won the Indiana Crossroads Conference, and backing up a second, this is the second number one team that won their conference. Hagerstown won the Tri-Eastern Conference. They were 16-10. Cascade was 24-5. They won the Indiana Crossroads Conference. Then they also took down Heritage Christian, who was very good in their own right. They were 17-8. They finished fourth in the Circle City Conference. As far as Illiana Christian for the regional round, they took down Winnemac, who was 18-5. They won the Hoosier North Conference. Then they had to go through Owen Willard and East Side, who was 21-8. They were fourth in the NECC, a great NECC, by the way. Let's talk about last week in the semi-state round. Centerville took down their third conference champion. They beat Linton Stockton, the Miners. They were first in the Southwest Indiana Athletic Conference. And Illiana Christian took down another conference winner. They took down the mighty Wapahani, who was 24-5. They won the Mid-Eastern Conference. And so, I mean, if you look at the road to get here, Centerville took down 3 conference champions to get here, and Illiana Christian took down 2. So I mean, it was a tough road to get here for sure. Let's look a little bit at maybe some team makeup or some team history. Steve, tell us about what we're looking at here.
Well, what you got is a public school in Centerville going against a private school. Centerville's first year that they were a part of the IHSAA, with a few interruptions, was 1912. Illiana Christian, who started out in Lansing, Illinois, right across the state line, and moved to Dyer in 2018, have been an IHSA member since 2018, and they've been tournament eligible. This is the second year they've been tournament eligible. Centerville is in Wayne County, and Centerville itself is a small place. Dyer is pretty medium-sized, and Lake County is very big. And the Illiana Christian campus is right along the expressway, so it's very much a urban environment where the school is. Of course, private school, they take kids from around the region there, but those are two things. And also, there will be history today, because the first state title in any sport will be won by one of these two teams, because either the Bulldogs or the Vikings have done so. Illiana Christian was in the state finals in Illinois a couple of times and got knocked out in the quarterfinal round.
Yeah, I like what Coach VenderWoude said about the excitement of being in the state finals, because in Illinois, he said they had that softball team that went to the state finals, but the format for their state finals was kind of a semifinal and final on the same day, so the community didn't really even know if the team was going to be in the finals yet. So this is their
Right. They
first.
did that in Indiana for a couple of years
Yeah.
back towards around 99, 2000. But that went away, and maybe that was the reason that they folded that.
Yeah,
format.
what much better format, because now you have a week to prepare. You have a week to get the community excited about it and do all the logistics of getting people here and things like that. And what you just said there, and I didn't know this, about Centerville being an IHSAA in 1912. And
I think the IHSAA was founded in like 11 or 10.
Yeah.
So, or,
And-
well, maybe actually 1903. So, but they were 1903. Now that I think about it, but they were one of the early ones for sure.
and Illiana Christian in 2018. But look at the records. One's 21-5, one's 21-7. Neither one, those ones you see right there in the semi-state, that's this year. This is both of them's first semi-state win. And now one of them, like Steve said, is going to have their first state final. We got a chance to talk to these coaches, and let's give it a listen.
We have some really good pitching, but we hit the ball well. I think, there's probably, I haven't looked at it a whole lot here in the last week, but I think of our 9 starters, there's probably 8 of them hitting over 300, which has been a strong suit. And that week, the pitchers that we faced shut us down. It's just plain and simple. We did not hit the ball well that week. And since then, we've pitched well, and we've produced some pretty good offensive numbers. Jacob's thrown more innings. I think he's in the 60, 63 innings. Logan went through the regular season without giving up an earned run. He actually only gave up 1 unearned run all year, and that was one of those games against Hagerstown. We had a couple outfielders just had some miscommunication. They ran into each other and dropped the ball. And that was his 1 unearned run that he'd given up all year. They're completely different pitchers, honestly. Logan is a little bit more, a little bit harder thrower, I believe. And he doesn't give up as many hits. Jake gives up a few more hits, but he's really good at keeping runners and batters off balance with his motion and his delivery. So it could be either one of them. I mean, we've gotten here with both of them throwing. Logan started the championship game of the semi-state. Each of them started one of the games in the regional. And I think Jacob pitched the championship game of the section. So it's really, whoever's feeling the best and whoever we think is going to have the best matchup come Friday night.
Seems like we're built a lot of the same way. We got speed and we got people that can hit. We got athletes all over the field. So, it looks like we're built a lot of the same. I know just looking at some of the stuff, it looks like a lot of football players on their team that I've seen just, through Twitter and stuff like that. So, yeah, strong kids, good kids. I mean, they're coached well. It's going to be a good game. I'm looking forward to it. Extremely proud of the kids. I'm proud of the way that, we talk about loving one another, as Christ does, right? And calls us to love your neighbor as yourself. And I think they exemplify that very well. And I'm very, very proud of these kids.
They got some really stout pitching over there. And I think it's going to be a great matchup. Our boys like to see better pitching, and they've seen some really good pitching in that Heritage Christian game, in the game against Cascade, really in the game against Linton Stockton, and in the game really get back to the Hagerstown game in our sectional. And Shenandoah has a nice left-handed pitcher as well that's had an outstanding season. So I think we're prepared, and we'll prepare more this week. But, good pitching, good offensive team. I think it'll be a good ball game.
Good stuff right there. Let's move along, and let's talk about the lineups. And this is taken directly from the IHSAA preview hand manual that the brochure that you can get there today at the games. And let's talk about some notable players here. And there are a lot, of course, with Centerville, the Pamplin twins. It's kind of funny that the coaches are talking about, because, they're twins. Sometimes they'll wear the wrong jersey and things like that, and it's just hard to tell them apart. But one's batting .410, one's batting .429. Good little lineup there. And, Steve, there was it says that that Druck is going to pitch today in this probable starting lineup, but Coach said there might be some others.
Jacob Crull could pitch. So it's kind of going to be what they decided the best matchup would be. I'm sure they will know. They probably know now, but they'll know by the time it's game time. Logan Druck has a little more mound time, but in the tournament, I think. But Jacob Crow's done very well, so could be either one of those guys.
Well, and like Coach said, one of them, has a better fastball, a lot of better command, of setting down the hitters basically, and the other one, plays that kind of that pitch to contact role and does a good job of keeping the base runners in check and keeping the game in control basically. So a good 1-2 punch there, and that's kind of a theme you'll see for all these teams, is that no team, even Brebeuf, as we talk to them, has just one pitcher to get here. Every team in the finals has at least two good pitchers. And as we look at Illiana Christian, we've got Corcoran. Am I pronouncing that right, Steve?
Kevin Corcoran.
Yep. Not only is good on the mound, but look at that .471 batting average. You've got him and Van Beek. They're loaded too, and like what the coach said, they are both teams are very similarly built with speed. At the 1A, first of all, at the 1 and 2A level, you got to have speed. You got to be able to bunt the ball. You got to, 1 and 2A teams year in and year out aren't going to have hitters with double-digit home runs. So there's a lot of good strategy. They utilize their speed. They utilize the bunt game very well. Both teams do. So a lot of similarities here in the matchup. Matter of fact, as Coach VenderWoude even said, that it should be a great game just because the type of game that both teams play really is very similar. And I like what Coach VenderWoude said. He could tell that a lot of those Centerville kids play football. They've got a pretty athletic team as well.
It's probably relative to the opponents that they're playing and everything, but Illiana Christian has only given up 6 runs in tournament play, so that's pretty impressive. They're like 62-6 or something like the run differential, so that's pretty crazy.
Well, and I believe is it Druck for Centerville that had 1 unearned run but no earned runs the whole season.
Right. These guys got infinitesimal ERAs, almost are 1 or they're below 1, and we got that all throughout the tournament. Yep. Actually,
we're at the state finals, folks. They didn't get here on accident. Now let's move on and let's talk about the 3A game, and we're talking about the Brebeuf Braves and the Andrean 59ers. I love that mascot name, 59ers. How do you beat that? Let's talk about how they got here. The sectional round, Brebeuf took down the Greencastle Tiger Cubs, who were 15-11. They finished 6th in the very tough WIC. And Kiefer Wilson there for Greencastle, another player right there who's one of the top players in the state. Got to mention him. Also in the sectional, they took down the Danville Warriors, Coach O'Neill, 12-15. They finished 6th in the Sagamore Conference. Then the sectional finals, they beat another Sagamore team, Tri-West, who was 13-12. They finished 5th in the Sagamore Conference. For Andrean, they were up at the Griffith sectional. They took down the Griffith Panthers and coached by Brian Jennings, who is now retired. The last game of his high school coaching career was a loss, but to a good Andrean team right there. So I know he's okay with that. Griffith was 13-12. They finished 2nd in the Greater South Shore Conference. Then they took down Calumet New Tech, who also is in that Greater South Shore Conference. Then beat a good South Bend St. Joe. I think that was a regional actually, where they beat South Bend St. Joe. And also in that regional, since we're talking about regionals, that Griffith regional that Andrean was in was brutal. They had to beat South Bend St. Joe. Then they took down Glenn, who Glenn just had a heck of a season. They were 30-3. They finished second in the Northern Indiana Conference, only falling just behind Penn, who is here this weekend in the 4A title. Also in that regional was Western, and I believe Hanover Central as well. So that 3A regional up there in Griffith at Andrean, where they had to get through South Bend, St. Joe, and Glenn, was just absolutely brutal. But, almost just as good was the regional that Brebeuf had to get through, and that included West Vigo, who was 27-1. They won the Western Indiana Conference this year, just one of the toughest 2A, 3A conferences in the state. And so they had to take down them. Then they beat Beech Grove, who was 13-14. They were fourth in the Indiana Crossroads Conference, but man, they ended their year on a roll. Go to the semi-state, and Brebeuf had to get through Silver Creek. They were another conference champion. They finished 29-7 and first in the Mid-Southern Conference. And man, and we'll hear here in a second Coach Scott talk about how good they were. I mean, matter of fact, he compared Silver Creek to Andrean. They prepared this week for Andrean in the same way they prepared for Silver Creek, because Silver Creek could just hit the ball from 1 through 9. They had great pitching. Can't say enough good things about Silver Creek. So, I mean, Brebeuf getting through West Vigo and Silver Creek, that's two teams that very easily could be here playing this weekend, was a tough road for sure. And then for Andrean semi-state, they had to get through 18-6 Newcastle and Aiden Decker-Petty. And matter of fact, Coach Pishkur talked about him in the interview. They were third in the Hoosier Heritage Conference, but in a one-game matchup where they had to face Aiden Decker-Petty, the IU commit, that was a brutal challenge in and of itself. And Coach Pishkur even mentioned, going up against Aiden Decker-Petty the week before they have to go up against Andrew DeCanich, is that helped prepare them. So that tells you the kind of talent they had to get through to make it here to the state finals. Let's talk about a little team and community makeup. Of course, these are both private schools. Steve, tell us about these a little bit.
Well, Brebeuf is in Indianapolis, of course, so they won't have much of a commute. Andrean is in Maryville, Northwest Indiana. They have a little further to come. So they're both coming from urban, big places, lots to draw from. I think there was a combination of almost 70 IHSAA schools between Marion and Lake County. All but a handful of those do play baseball. But like I said, these are private schools. Interestingly about Andrean, there's 413 students in the enrollment the last time they published that enrollment, and that is less than both of the schools in 2A. So wow. Andrean was in 4A a couple of years ago, and this is the IHSAA success factor in action. You get so many points, and you are required to move up to the next class in that cycle. So that's two. You look at Brebeuf and you see two semi-state titles, and Andrean is 7-1 when they play in the state championship game. So they've been there a whole bunch of times. Dave Pishkur this is his 42nd season. So all of those wins, and he's got 1,070 of them all on his watch, more than any baseball, I think, any sport, any coach in Indiana. And Jeff Scott had a lot of success. It's his fourth year at Brebeuf, and then he's hanging it up after Friday. He's decided that he's going to spend a little more time seeing his family. Brebeuf is, more on the north side of things in Indianapolis, and he lives in the Center Grove district. Got young kids involved in different things. Before he was at Center Grove, he was at Martinsville, and that was a little closer to home. But that's why he's doing that. So he kind of kept it under his hat all year. I think his players knew it. Brebeuf baseball community probably did, but general public didn't. But he wants to go out on top, I'm sure.
I'll tell you what, whoever wins this game, there's one thing for sure. This is a special state finals right here. You're looking at a couple pitchers we're going to talk about here in a minute that are just on a special level of good. And matter of fact, before we get to it, let's listen to both coaches talk about each other's team as well as the opponent they're playing today. Let's give it a listen.
They're going to be well prepared. They're going to pitch it well and defend it well. And I'm certain they'll have a good game plan to try to attack Andrew as well, just as Silver Creek did this past weekend. So I feel like it's a pretty similar game that we just prepared for with Silver Creek and Andrean. Both really good programs. Have won a lot of ball games over the years, been in state championship games, and very well coached. So we're going to go. We're going to go into it this week at practice, preparing very similar to how we prepared for this past weekend.
You know what? We faced the kid going to Oklahoma this year from Mount Carmel. We faced the kid from Brother Rice, their ace, is going to Purdue. We faced a kid from Homewood Flossmoor that's going to Kent State. We faced a Jeffersonville kid who's going to Indiana State. We faced another kid going to Indiana State. We've seen good pitching this year. The problem is I think Dukanich might be a step up from good pitching. He might be, that elite generational type of talent that maybe Brebeuf doesn't, maybe nobody sees too often. We've attacked, we're fortunate at Andrean that we have a lot of good equipment. And we have this thing called the iPitch. The iPitch is a $14,000 pitching machine that you'll see all the pro teams have it. You'll see probably the majority of the Division I collegiate teams have it, but you'll probably see about 1% high school teams that have it. It's a $14,000 machine, and it's got the capabilities of throwing pitch to pitch, location to location. You can throw a 97-mile-an-hour fastball on the first pitch and come back with a 76-mile-an-hour breaking pitch on the next pitch within 2 seconds. So the last 2 weeks, because we faced a really strong arm individual out of Newcastle last week, the machine's been sitting at 90 to 95 the 2 weeks in a row. So we've seen velocity, we've seen breaking pitches, we've seen hit sliders that do the same thing as Ducanich's does. But experiencing them in practice and then in a game time on the biggest stage is another thing that we'll have to see. We did a great job against Petty last week. I mean, he was topped out at 92 and we hit him really hard. I'm not saying that's going to happen to Dukanich because again, this is, we're facing a guy that's maybe throws a little harder, maybe has a little bit better breaking stuff. And maybe he's even more confident. I don't know. But the same approach, know that you can catch up to his fastball, know that you could hit his breaking pitch as long as it's a strike. I mean, all curveballs that aren't strikes or all sliders that aren't strikes are virtually unhittable. But all pitches that are in the strike zone and in your specific area become very hittable. So we have to be patient. We have to have a good approach at the plate. And if we adhere to our approach and our plan, that hopefully we'll be able to put the ball in play a little bit and maybe scratch out a run or two.
And Steve, I tell you another example, just two great men. And one thing I want to highlight here real quick is, and I've talked about this before in the show, is, Coach Scott of Brebeuf talked about how he had a meeting with the players at the beginning of the year, a leadership meeting with the players at the beginning of the year to talk about the season ahead of them. And that's part of Coach Scott's leadership program that he implemented this year. And it's just it's a really neat concept. And I wanted to, we talked to him about it back in January at the Indiana High School Baseball Coaches Association Clinic here in Indianapolis. And Coach Scott gave us just a little bit of insight into why he started that program and what it's all about. Let's give it a listen here real quick.
I used to complain a lot about kids can't lead today. Back in 2019, I got tired of complaining about it and said, we want to do something about it. So we started a leadership council back in 2019 with our program, where we teach leadership 1 day a week. Every Wednesday, right now, we have class. And our leadership council comes in, I put together a curriculum, we might go through some role playing, I give them some homework, and I just create a leadership class to teach our kids how to lead, not only for our program, but that carries on in life with them. And that skill has gone away a little bit with our society today, not just kids. So it's important to me. I want our kids to have life lessons when they leave the program.
Just a great program, great concept. I wanted to show that again real quick because, other coaches listening to the program, what a great idea. Just fantastic idea. And you probably get tired of hearing me say it, but I'm a fan of baseball, but I'm a fan of the fact that there are good men leading these programs. I completely understand why Coach Scott is stepping down after today. And tomorrow's show, we're going to talk about quite a few coaches that are retiring this year. I don't think it's any extraordinary number. I don't think it's a sign of anything that we need to be worried about. It's just some coaches who have been doing it for a while, and they're stepping down. And I think that's a good thing. In high school, it's just the cycle of bringing in the next man up. And, it's just we can only be so lucky if they're as good of men as some of the ones that are stepping down. And we're going to talk about that more tomorrow. Now, I mentioned that this is going to be a special game, and it absolutely is. I also mentioned earlier that, no team gets here with just one player. Steve, tell us about some of the people we need to look at here. If we could focus, we could really highlight the whole list here on this, but tell us about some of these players that we really are really something special we need to talk about.
Well, on the Brebeuf side of the ledger, you got Andrew Dukanich. Duke is committed to Vanderbilt, but he could go high in the MLB draft this July. He just, he's striking out almost right around two batters an inning. And then if for some reason they needed to go to their number 2, Sam Reed is legit too. He's also their first baseman and a very good hitter. You look at Andrean, and they're just, Peyton Nish is going to get the ball, and he is something special on the mound. He's a very good hitter too. Mason Barth is the number in the two hole hitting 406, and on a very veteran team, he's just a freshman. I like how you always say just a freshman, just a sophomore. They don't say you're just a senior, you're just a junior, but that's just the way we talk. Jax Kalemba is hitting the 30s. He's at 460. So, and this is a team in the state finals and has played a very good schedule. They've gone and played the best teams they can find in Indiana, and they played teams in Tennessee and Kentucky at the beginning of the year, and they play in a very good tournament in Chicago at the end of the year to kind of show where they're at. So they haven't been, padding their stats.
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, you talk about schedule strength. These two teams right here are 1A and 1B as far as the toughest schedules in Indiana. Just because of all those teams they play out of state, even the teams they play in state. I could talk about this matchup for quite a while. Sam Reed for Brebeuf, their number 2, throws 92, and he's a north-south all-star. Mason Barth is a freshman, and and he's something special, folks. You want to keep an eye on him.
You got 43 RBIs on that team.
Yeah, a freshman starting at shortstop for Andrean. That's something special. You need to keep an eye on him for sure. So, just a great matchup right there. Those are today's games, folks. As we wrap things up, I want to talk about a couple reminders. First of all, after this week, we're going to be announcing our BAI 9. That is our elite players who brought the most value to their teams, and they get one of these custom bats that says 2022 BAI 9. There's only 9 of them. You have to be an elite player who brought elite value to your team. So it's not just about stats. It's not just about who has the best pitching speed or most home runs or anything like that. Those are part of the equation, but we also talk to coaches all across the state. And we've been researching this basically from the beginning of the year, watching players closely. And we have what we think are the top 9 players in the state who not only have great elite stats, but also have brought the most value to their team as well. And we're going to be announcing those next week, along with our broadcast at the IHSBCA Futures game, which is Wednesday. We will be broadcasting that. Make sure you go to baseballacrossindiana.com. Follow us on Twitter. You see there at the bottom of your page, Home Plate BAI, for the link to make sure you chime in to watch our broadcast of the Futures game. Lastly, I also have to mention that this Sunday is our Father's Day special. It's going to be on at 8 p.m. at baseballacrossindiana.com. We've got some great interviews. We've talked to people all over the state on that special bond between fathers and baseball. Fathers, children, and baseball. Just that trifecta right there is, there's something special about it. And that's why we wanted to talk about that for our Father's Day special. Folks, here is the lineup for today and tomorrow at Victory Field. Today is our first round matchups once again between Centerville and Illiana Christian, followed by Brebeuf and Andrean. Tomorrow we have Tecumseh and Lafayette Central Catholic, followed by Cathedral versus Penn. This
First
is my
game today is at 5:30.
5:30, and
4:30 is the first game Saturday.
weather's going to be just fine. I don't think
It's
we
going
got
to be it's going to be hot today, not quite as hot tomorrow, but looks like it's going to be dry. So that's wonderful news.
folks. We're playing baseball today. We'll see you at the Vic.